Gates of Thievery, page 114. She remained on the steps waiting for Papa, watching the stray ash and the corpse of collected books. Everything was sad. Orange and red embers looked like rejected candy, and most of the crowd had vanished. She'd seen Frau Diller, very satisfied, in Fivika's white hair, a Nazi uniform, and same dilapidated shoes, and a triumphant whistle. Now there was nothing but cleaning up, and soon no one would even imagine it had happened. But you could smell it. What are you doing? Hans Human arrived at the church steps. Hi, Papa. You were supposed to be in front of the town hall. Sorry, Papa. He sat down next to her, halving his tallness on the concrete and taking a piece of Liesel's hair. His fingers adjusted it gently behind her ear. Liesel, what's wrong? For a while, she said nothing. She was making calculations, despite already knowing. An 11-year-old girl is many things, but she is not stupid. A small addition, the word communist and large bonfire, and a collection of dead letters, plus the suffering of her mother and the death of her brother, equals the Führer. The Führer. He was the they that Hans and Rosa Huberman were talking about that evening when she first wrote to her mother. She knew it, but she had to ask. Is my mother a communist? Staring straight ahead. They were always asking her things before I came here. Hans edged forward a little, forming the beginnings of a lie. I have no idea. I never met her. Did the Führer take her away? The question surprised them both, and it forced Papa to stand up. He looked at the brown-shirted men taken to the pile of ash with shovels. He could hear them hacking into it. Another lie was growing in his mouth, but he found it impossible to let out. He said, I think he might have, yes. I knew it. The words were thrown at the steps, and Liesel could feel the slush of anger stirring hotly in her stomach. I hate the Führer, she said. I hate him. And Hans Huberman, what did he do? What did he say? Now, she says this out loud, okay? So Hans has to react, so they know that he wouldn't put up with it in his home, even though it's not something he wanted to do, but he has to show these people, if anybody heard it, that he wouldn't put up for this. Did he bend down and embrace his foster daughter as he wanted to? Did he tell her that he was sorry for what was happening to her mother, for what happened to her brother? Not exactly. He clenched his eyes. Then he opened them. He slapped Liesel Memminger squarely in the face. Don't ever say that again. His voice was quiet but sharp. As the girl shook and sagged on the steps, he sat next to her and held his face in his hands. It would be easy to say that he was just a tall man sitting poor-postured and shattered on some church steps, but he wasn't. At the time, Liesel had no idea that her foster father, Hans Huberman, was contemplating one of the most dangerous dilemmas a German citizen could face. Not only that, he'd been facing it for close to a year. So he's doing something right now. The most dangerous thing he could possibly do, he's contemplating doing. You don't know what that is yet, but it's on his mind. And so for her to say that, he has to make sure that they're not being held suspicious, because if they are, then this dangerous thing could potentially kill all of them. Okay? Papa, the surprise in her voice rushed her, but it also rendered her useless. She wanted to run, but she couldn't. She could take a washing from nuns and Rosas, but it hurt so much more from Papa. The hands were gone from Papa's face now, and he found the resolve to speak again. You could say that in our house, he said, looking gravely at Liesel's cheek. You never say it on the street or at school, at the BDM, never. He stood in front of her and lifted her by the triceps. He shook her. Do you hear me? With her eyes trapped wide open, Liesel nodded her compliance. It was, in fact, a rehearsal for a future lecture, when all of Hans Huberman's worst fears arrived on Himmel Street later that year in the early hours of November morning. Good. He placed her back down. Now, let us try. At the bottom of the steps, Papa stood erect and cocked his arm. 45 degrees, Hail Hitler. Liesel stood up and also raised her arm. With absolute misery, she repeated it, Hail Hitler. It was quite a sight, an 11-year-old girl trying not to cry on the church steps, saluting the Führer as the voices over Papa's shoulders chopped and beat at the dark shape in the background. Are we still friends? Perhaps a quarter of an hour later, Papa held a cigarette olive branch in his palm, a paper of tobacco he'd just received. Without a word, Liesel reached gloomily across and proceeded to roll it. For quite a while, they sat there together. Smoke climbed over Papa's shoulder. After another 10 minutes, the gates of thievery would open just a crack, and Liesel Memminger would widen them a little further and squeeze through. Two questions. Would the gates shut behind her, or would they have the goodwill to let her back out? As Liesel would discover, a good thief requires many things. Stealth, nerve, speed. More important than any of those things, however, was one final requirement: luck. Actually, forget the 10 minutes. The gates open now.